Hello, everybody. Welcome back to yet another chapter of this saga. It's season 2 of And Just Like That, episode 3, also called chapter 3. Pardon me. I have incredibly mixed feelings about this particular episode. There is a lot to really hate about this episode, and I will absolutely, step by step, perhaps the most disturbing and disgusting scene, maybe. I don't know. That's probably an exaggeration. But certainly the most ill advised and one of the more irresponsible scenes ever captured, perhaps, on television. I don't know what these people were thinking. But again, there's actually a lot of good here, I think. There's a lot I would like to make compliments on. But I'm very, very mixed. The first time I saw this episode, I had kind of finished up a really long project and was celebrating that night. My husband and I were on the couch binge watching 90 Day Fiance. And then it was 3 a.m. and I'm like, hey, it's starting anyway. I'm gonna watch it like actually live when it gets posted. And HBO, or I'm sorry, Max. Max posted it a little bit late, but we watched it together. My husband was sober. I had been drinking a little bit too much box wine while making fun of the contestants on 90 Day Fiance. And yeah, I came in with this. I was like weeping. I just had constant tears streaming down my face throughout the duration of this episode. And then my husband kind of brought me back to life at the end. He understood why I was crying, but he's like, please don't waste tears on this show. This is so boring. He said the whole episode was really boring, pretty stupid, and he was like, "Oh my God, did they just like lust after a kid at his school? Like that's gross." He's like, "Why are you crying? This is just trash." And also like, are they have they just been talking about Big like the entire time? Because he doesn't follow, and he knew that I was crying and upset the very first episode when Big died. And so like half this episode, they're just reliving Big's death, causing me to cry and have memories of my own husband and his heart attack, and I was just a mess. So for that reason, overall, like very tricky episode, but there's some good stuff too. So let me talk you through it step by step. First scene we have is Carrie just walking around the streets, and her downstairs neighbor Lisette recognizes her, calls her over, invites her to a jewelry pop-up show that she's doing, and Carrie says yes, and on my way to do the recording, to record the audiobook for my novel that has been published and is in paperback, and people have physical copies of this thing. This again, timeline kind of surprising. I just assumed she started writing and submitting manuscripts the moment the funeral was over, because this is, I mean, if you know the publishing world, this is pretty darn fast. And it's sort of one of these surprise things. I know that apparently, Charlotte asks about how the book is coming along, but it just seems like just a whole lot has you know gone down. But they don't really care about timelines here, so suspend disbelief. She's got a book all ready to go. All right. Uh, then we have Seema. She's coming out of her townhouse, and as soon as she does, some guy just runs off with her Birkin bag. Just runs right off. And okay, a compliment. I know that this series, they were talking in the writers' room about this episode. They're trying to highlight how crime has risen in New York. So there's some criming going on in this episode for sure. Honestly, I gotta say, I hand it to these New York women or any woman who can go down in these areas and have really expensive purses that you just hold on to the handles or clutches or things like that. I had many of my formative years in Chicago. There is a reason I am a crossbody girl. Having lost a purse that way myself, having seen other women lose purses. I do a crossbody with a very strong strap all the time because even a light strap will get you snatched. I don't know, but she walked around very, with just with her Birkin bag, and of course it got grabbed and stolen, and that sucks. All right, now we go back to Carrie recording this, and she's having a real hard time struggling to even read her writing through this, and same girl, same. I couldn't get through this scene. I didn't rewatch it. I couldn't even, anytime she's in this recording booth and talking about it, like, I simply can't. So I get it, I understand it, and it does make me realize, yeah, a lot of these celebrities, they tell these really painful memoirs, and then they have to go in and record it, and I never really gave it much thought. And I love, love, love listening to audiobooks from like comedians, and when comedians tell their life stories, and a lot of times they're very tortured life stories, which is how they became comedians in the first place. It's devastating, but they do a good job reading it. They get through it, and I don't know what psychological tricks they use, but oh, when I tell you, this scene made me a human puddle. Ridiculous. All right, so now we're with Miranda and Shay in Los Angeles. Uh, they're working out Shay's lines, they're doing a little practice. The lines are ridiculous. Tony Danza's supposed to call this, Shay his little cannoli. Shay is supposed to cry during this particular scene and doesn't really want to do it with Miranda, just, talk through the lines, and then starts crying. Shay starts crying when they realize that the scene is entirely inappropriate. It has nothing to do with Shay's life at all, and it's supposed to be autobiographical. Shay also doesn't want to make it sound like, coming out as non binary is this big, tragic, sad thing. But I got to do a shout out here. Shout out to Android. You know, one of the things between these two seasons, Michael Patrick King was talking about how before season 2 of And Just Like that all of a sudden these brands became very concerned with how their products were being represented. It's like, yeah, no kidding. You guys wrecked Peloton. Like, I live in a community where they were going to open up they were in the process of opening up a Peloton factory, and that was going to be 2,000 jobs, and they cut it, okay? Like, it cost like jobs. Like, it was ridiculous. And just because of that scene. And I'm sure Snapple wasn't really thrilled with Carrie pissing into the bottle last season. So I'm really surprised. I have to think Android did a little due diligence. And why on earth would you and the whole episode, Miranda is complaining about how terrible this Android phone is. And every chance she gets, she mentions the name Android. I I'm I don't even understand anymore. Like, how is this show even running and not like completely sued into oblivion? It's just I don't know, man. Michael Patrick King has figured out the dumbest, the least active marketing teams ever. There's something called due diligence when it comes to product placement, and already I think that season 1 is going to be a textbook case for college kids studying marketing and public relations, like, for all time. It'll be in a textbook for sure, that whole Peloton scene. And the fact that Android allowed this is beyond me. All right, next we have Naya is filming this documentary with LTW. She's one of the, I guess, featured interviewees. And while they are filming this segment, this very hot guy, again, Naya is attracting these men who are pretty aggressive. Like the last guy came up to her at a bar. She had her purse up. She had a giant book in front of her. She had a wedding ring on. It still didn't slow him down at all, hardly. This guy, he's at work. This is a guy at work, working for LTW and grabbing a mic down her shirt or collecting one. He wouldn't even be like, and I've been in studios before and I've had microphone mishaps and they'll be like, okay, hey, can you grab that mic for me? And then I'll put it on a better part of your shirt. But they don't go fishing for it. I mean, and the idea that, yeah, he's at work. He's at his job. I mean, okay, whatever. He's cute. It's okay when they're cute. All right. So now we have they're meeting up with Charlotte and Carrie, and there is definitely a theme I've noticed with this particular episode. The Met Ball, everybody knows that's like done on the 1st of May. It's on May Day. And so if they're anywhere near the Met Gala, time-wise, then they're in May, and I've noticed it's just so many flowers in this episode. Like all the restaurants they go to have these gorgeous jewel tone flowers everywhere. I'm loving the spaces. I'm loving the jewel tones when people are wearing them. So compliments to that. They have this lunch in a gorgeous space, and they're talking about, how, and we're going to get to the worst story of all time, but, Charlotte and LTW are excited to make it to the MILF list, a list some as of yet unknown child at this high school, at Lily School, has created to rank the hotness of the mothers in at the school, and they're all giddy because LTW is number 1 on this list, and Charlotte is number 2, and Charlotte is number 3, and they're all excited, and of course Naya comes up, and Naya's now our stand-in, I guess, Miranda, and she's like, don't we all have better things, more mature things to talk about, the socioeconomic impacts of blah blah blah. And then all of a sudden, the cute microphone guy, texts her. So all of a sudden, she's super happy and giggly like a little girl. So they're having a moment. Okay, so then Carrie leaves the restaurant and goes to, walking down the street again. Is called down from somebody in the street. Essentially, it's Mitzi Van Muffling. She's just finished getting her lip waxed at a salon and knocks on the window in time for Carrie to see and come in and talk to her. I will say this is some of the most beautiful, like again, there's a couple nuggets. You get these scenes of real beauty and insight, and this is one of them. This is a very sweet scene where, Mitzi Van Muffling, she went through the death. Her husband, Nathan Lane, died of COVID, and that was one of the things that was mentioned the first season. And she's talking to Carrie about it, and she says, the hole never gets filled, but new life grows around it, and it's up to you to just sort of plant your seeds and, try to do whatever you need to do to feel better. And just a really good way about grief. And I'll tell you, there were so many complaints about last season, but one of the consistent compliments I heard told about this show over and over again was that they nailed grief. People who were reporting on this or commenting on Twitter or had podcasts there was one guy, a gay man who had recently lost his partner, who the partner died. They were saying how so much of what Carrie was doing and went through, like going through the closet and looking for everything that everything this person had in his pockets and his wallet to try to get a better understanding of him, things like that. And the inconsistency of grief, like they're like, no, this nailed it. If anybody you've ever been through there. So I do think that they're probably handling grief very well. And this is a beautiful, touching scene. it's just kind of a bummer, right? It's just so sad. You kind of were hoping, especially after that first episode, they'd get back to the fun and happiness of it without just the constant devastation of grief coming back and coming back. And oh, it was a little bit brutal. Um, but then Carrie goes and she does what they called in the writer's room a shoe orgy. She goes off and buys a ton of shoes to cope, which is a very Carrie thing to do. And from the most fashionable to the least fashionable, Miranda is in California wandering around uh, like a crazy lady with no direction and a stupid hat. She looks very Woody Allen in this scene. And she happens upon a tattoo parlor and thinks, hey, I think I'm going to get a tattoo. And the guy at the tattoo parlor was great, and he's suggesting like Rosie the robot from the Jetsons. Yeah, I would love to see her get a Rosie the robot tattoo. That would actually kind of denote a sense of humor and personality. And we know Miranda doesn't have that right now, but Miranda wants to get a tattoo to commemorate this beautiful, enchanted moment of her life where she has no direction and no real purpose except to root for a dang near stranger, Che, who appears to become more sociopathic with every scene. So I don't know if I would want to commemorate this moment in my life if I were her. But to each their own. I'm always supportive of people getting tattoos, particularly regrettable tattoos. They just make for excellent conversation. All right. Next we have Carrie. She's back in her apartment, and just at this point, I think at this point she's just faking. I'm not going back to those recording scenes because I can't. I can't even. But she's faking COVID to stay home. So she's just faking COVID, and they have some interesting fashion moments here. Here she's trying on the Lowe's deflated red balloon shoe. Those were everywhere. There's different versions of the deflated red balloon, but I don't know what you'd actually wear them with, how practical they are. But she's putting one off here, and they are trying to get these iconic fashion moments. You have Charlotte talking to her on the phone. The girl is wearing a Burberry shirt, a Burberry apron, and matching Burberry shoes. I've never seen one chick shill so hard for a specific brand the way Charlotte just is constantly promoting Burberry. What Burberry needs to do is do a really giant puffy sleeve to achieve the ultimate Charlotte. Now we have Seema. Seema finally is getting a little bit of color on her. Now near her face is still the white and the golds and the creams, very, still with these sort of brownish color palettes. But a little blue, a little red, kind of coming up closer to her face. So a little bit of color creeping up on Seema. She's upset about her Birkin bag, of course. Then Seema has a nice little lunch with Anthony again. Another beautiful space, another beautiful flowers. She's getting more into a brighter orange in that color palette, starting to brighten up a bit. But still, they really do keep her in a very specific color palette, and I want to see her break free like completely. But yeah, they're having lunch together, wondering where Carrie is because Carrie just completely forgot the lunch. And this is one of those things where I would normally, maybe she's just so deep in grief that she forgot. And I know Carrie was a true asshole last season. I do think that they're trying to make her more considerate this season, more thoughtful a little bit. But I do think when people are going through grieving like this, that they can afford to be a little selfish. I'm not mad at Carrie. I am, however, extremely pissed off at Charlotte and LTW. And guys, this scene is so stupid and awful that I need to break it down line by line if you guys are ready. I don't know how these grown ass actresses were all willing to do this, why these writers did this in the first place. And even after that, YHB, or I'm sorry, Max, were like, okay, yeah, that's good. Like, I guess Max has no say over what goes on. This is just abhorrent. So they're on the MILF list and they're talking in the hallways of this high school. It's a private school. And they're chatting about how they found the culprit. And is it another Milo? No, it's Milo H. Milo H is the kid that did this. And who is this Milo H? Well, the kid who they start off talking about him as a small child. The kid who wore his night brace all through the sixth grade. Again, they are talking about a sixth grader at this point. Even on picture day, yeah. The one who couldn't say his S's. Now, this lovely little turd here, this blonde lady, Ainsley, and I'm calling this episode Ainsley Growls. I know it's chapter 3. I'm calling it Ainsley Growls because Ainsley Growls is going to be an inflection point, I think, of this series. Ainsley, the whitest woman ever with the whitest name ever, mocking this kid in the sixth grade for not pronouncing his S's. And we're remembering him as a child. Well, this other chick says, the nerds are always the pervs. The nerds are always the pervs. Again, they're talking about this kid and their memory of him in the sixth grade. So a sixth grader is like an 11 or 12-year-old, okay? And they're talking about this kid this way. Guys, Charlotte said, guys, I'm not comfortable with this. I mean, we're talking about a little boy here. But then the bell rings, and this is, guys, the bell rings, and this kid starts walking off. And I do mean a kid. He looks his age. This looks like a medium, regular-looking boy who looks his age. And they start playing. And this is a very quiet episode. It's something my husband pointed out to me, too, and I forget. Like, this is really weirdly, a strangely quiet series. There's no background music. There's no background chatter. It almost sounds like they're in a sound tunnel. And guys, I know that my stuff doesn't sound great either. Believe me, I know I have an expensive microphone. I don't know if I ever figured out how to use it. I'm still working on it. So I do want to thank you guys for sticking with me and my crappy equipment use, or maybe it's the equipment, I don't know. But they finally get sound in here, and they play He Be Like by Ken the Man playing, or I'm sorry, Ken the Man. I'm just reading it. I don't know who Ken the Man is. I'm just reading the closed captioning here. And it's this whole rap song about, he be fine, or, whatever, he be fine, she be thick, and all this stuff. And it's a little, again, this kid looks like he's 17. He is he be like, damn you thick. And this guy, he's looking at him, but he's like a regular boy. You be that bitch. And they're all lusting after him, and they're looking at him. Is that Milo H? H is for hot. Which is, it's so embarrassing to write that on its own. If anybody said that, H is for hot. And he's a medium level boy. It's not like they got Jason Momoa, like a 25-year-old Jason Momoa, and put him in this scene. You know what? They look like they got a regular ass 17-year-old guy. I'm not trying to insult this kid's look, but you're talking about a guy who looks, even if he's in his 30s, this guy legit looks 17, okay? And he looks like, they're in a private school in Manhattan where half the women in this little group went to the Met Gala. So I assume that all these kids are millionaires, that they all come from model families. There's probably a lot of good-looking kids at this school. And these women, oh my God, Milo H is for hot. And then Ainsley growls. Yes, she growls seductively at this child. Then LTW says, why do I feel like Blanche Dubois? For those of you who are unfamiliar, Blanche Dubois is a very famous character from the play A Streetcar Named Desire. Her character is an old Southern belle, not old, aging Southern belle who got kicked out of her hometown in Mississippi for sleeping with a 17-year-old. All right? So effing gross. Like, why? And then they go back to this conference room where they're talking and, listening to the guy at the podium, and they're like, oh, we're going to get this boy who did the MILF list, and it's going to go on his permanent record for college. And Charlotte's like, oh, is that really necessary? Is that warranted, his full record? I mean, really, are we overreacting? And then he's like, gets noticed that the women were like ogling a teenager at school, and they're like, oh, were they? Were women ogling the kids? I guess we're supposed to find this funny. This is really stupid, and I wanted to wait to do this episode until I listened to the writer's room. The writer's room, they don't acknowledge at all in any way these women ogling this kid, a fully dressed kid, making it his way down a hallway in his school. It is so creepy. They don't acknowledge it at all. The only thing they talk about this part of it is that this is like comic relief, and that, how these schools, both private schools and public schools, are trying to get everything so perfect that they're kind of overcompensating and over-punishing kids and things like that. Guys, this was a terrible way to make that point. This is the worst possible way you can make that point. This is just wholly disgusting. This is trash. I mean, I don't understand. We're in 2023. Like, on what planet is this considered acceptable at all? I'm like astonished. Like, and I don't consider myself prude. I don't consider myself easily shocked. I've seen Euphoria. I get it, but I don't know if I want to watch that icon thing though. But this is, I mean, come on. Imagine if this were reversed. And I even asked my husband this. I'm like, imagine if there was like a girl, a hot teenage girl, 17 years old, and she created a DILF list. And my husband would be like, I would never show up to school and look at her and ogle her or ogle any kid. That's really disgusting. Because I'd be flattered to be on a DILF list, though. I'd be pretty stoked to be listed as hot by kids, but I wouldn't like look back at them. And that's what they're doing. They're looking back at this child. It's so gross. And it's like, ew. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break here to give a shout out to the Queen, Kim Cattrall. Because if you guys recall, this wasn't going to be a series, it was going to be a third movie. And in the third movie, Michael Patrick King wrote it so that like a young, I don't know how old, I'm going to say like a 14-year-old, Brady Hobbs Brady, was going to be sexting Samantha Jones, and how Samantha would address that. And Kim Cattrall, the queen that she is, wholeheartedly rejected it and refused to do the movie. And so apparently this has been something they've been wanting to do for a while. Apparently, and Michael Patrick King does seem to have this point of view that if a woman does it, it's okay. Women can treat men like crap, it's fine. Women can get away with it. They don't have to face consequences. If a woman acts bad, as long as it's to somebody that's not women. If they can treat their gay friends bad, they can treat men bad, they can treat small boys going to their classes bad, as long as they're not bad to other women. Such horseshit. Pardon the French, I'm sorry. Such nonsense. So I want to again thank the lovely Kim Cattrall, who also retweeted me today. I know she wouldn't want to normally retweet something called, from something called Miranda's Hobbs Cheap Wig, but I'm at Hobbs Wig again, so a little shout out to her. And also a quick plug, if you haven't watched the Netflix series Glamorous, I would give it a shot. It's a little bit, the first episode's a little bit Disney, wide-eyed, ambitious. Oh my God, a makeup influencer and I'm going to go work for the queen. It is a little kind of that Disney vibe. And it is a little cheesy. It's like kind of like Ugly Betty or sort of that kind of Glee spirit, even though it's not Glee. It's more like Devil Wears Prada a little bit. Um, but it gets better after the first episode, and it's fun, and it's smart, and the outfits are much better. It's a superior. It's fun. It just makes you giggle. It's very 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 gay. Um, but if that's not a problem for you at all, and you want a good laugh and a good giggle, it's definitely worth a check out. So I just needed a little Kim Cattrall fabulousness and glamorousness to kind of cleanse the palate after the epically gross scene. Okay, so now we're back in Los Angeles. Miranda's waiting in line. She gets a disturbing call from her son. Brady Hobbs Brady is really upset. He's crying. He's hysterical. He's been trying to reach his mom on her terrible Android phone for days, and she can't get an emergency important call because Android is so terrible. And he is out in the middle of Amsterdam, and his girlfriend left him for no reason and just left and went to Italy. And so he's upset and he's like hoping cars hit him. He's, threatening self harm. Miranda's really upset. She wants him to get to the hostel and call her back the moment he gets to the hostel. She wants him to focus on getting home or to his destination safely. And she hides her phone and, in her pants. They're taking the phones away from audience members so that they don't distract or record this Che Pasa pilot episode. So she hides it in her pants and lies to the security guard, sneaks her phone in. And then a quick shot to Carrie with a face mask on, playing sick, pretending she has COVID, eating chocolates, reading a book. Sounds like a nice day. And her publisher calls her again. Her publisher is calling her. First thing the publisher does is get a cup of coffee. Looks like she's at a coffee house. And then immediately right next to the coffee is like a florist stand. And she's getting these big bouquets of flowers again. And she's wearing these gorgeous jewel tones. I'm loving the flowers. They could just do this in every episode. I'm such a sucker for it. Okay, now we get back to Che Pasa. I will say this, and if you listen to the writers' room, you really get a sense that they wanted to make this the cheesiest, corniest possible kind of sitcom ever. I don't know what Michael Patrick King, his history is with multi-camera sitcoms like this, but clearly the writers in his room uh, really love making fun of sitcoms like this. Like, I feel like a lot of them have had sort of bad experiences in their lives. So they really wanted to mock this. They really seem to have a really good time making the set as cheesy as possible, making the writing as cheesy as possible. Having Tony Danza in a show called Che Pasa, where he was supposed to be her Mexican dad, and have Mexican blankets everywhere and Mexican this and that all over the place, and he's calling her his little cannoli. It's just so mixed up and stupid, like the whole thing, and the bright blue chairs and the apron, like why? Because everybody wears aprons. Only in TV land do people wear, I think, aprons all the time. I don't know, especially over like jeans and a shirt like that. I don't know, but Miranda gets her call. Of course, Brady Hobbs Brady calls her at the exact wrong time. She interrupts. She causes the whole scene to stop while Che is, drumming up these tears for Tony Danza, and the obnoxious producers like yelling at Miranda, they kick her out. It ruins the whole scene. Che has to figure out how to get these tears again, and Che is really pissed off. You can see Che is really pissed off. Tony Danza is trying to keep everything light and happy because he's a pro. So then Miranda leaves. And she immediately calls Charlotte. So this is again, I'm trying to be positive this season, people. I loved this. I love that Miranda's in distress. and she calls Charlotte for advice. I don't know that we've ever seen that. In this whole series, there's always been sort of this mocking thing. I know that they're friends, and I know they've had some really beautiful moments together, especially those wonderful drinks they had in the second movie, where they really relate to each other as mothers. But this was beautiful. This, like, Miranda calling Charlotte and her dog, and of course the real star of this series is definitely Richard Burton. But he's walking around in rain boots. Great. Just I don't know what people do with their dogs. But yeah, just always dressed up, always looking very dashing. This bulldog. But I do like that and I like the outfit Charlotte's wearing. I just think this is just a lovely scene where they can help each other out in unexpected ways. I live for those sort of things. And moving on to Carrie and Seema having a similar bonding moment where, Carrie lost her husband, Seema lost her Birkin bag. These were both things that these women worked very hard to get. Carrie worked hard to get her relationship with Big. Seema worked hard to get that bag. They're both feeling losses, and they're all listening to each other whine like friends do. And now they're going to go to Gisette's, or Lizette, I forget her name, but the neighbor's jewelry store because Carrie's going to try to be a better friend and doesn't want to be burdensome to her current girlfriend. So again, I see the effort here. Um, but now we get to this scene, and I think if there's one triumphing moment of this particular episode, if there's one good thing to come out of this episode, is that we might, and I know that there are other shots of Che coming up, so I don't think that Che is completely out of this series. But this definitely cements that, Che's not going to be a thing anymore, right? Like, we're done with Che. And what's weird is I was listening to the writer's room, and first let me just say, Che is really pissed off Miranda ruined the scene, which is okay, understandable, sure. But then Miranda immediately tells Che, oh my gosh, Brady is off in Amsterdam. He was having these terrible self-harm statements, threatening. I don't think I could say it on YouTube, but threatening the worst. And I'm going to go home right away. I'm going to try to beat him back to New York and be there for him when he flies in. I got to get going. And Che is just all about Che. Che doesn't care. Che is like, oh, it's just a kid. And kids break up and it happens. And Miranda's like, no, that's my kid. And you're playing a family scene, but I have a real family scene I got to get to right now. And she's trying to be really nice and supportive of Che, even in all this. She's like, your thing's going to be huge, and don't be so mad, and da-da-da, it's not personal. I have to get to my kid. And Che is still just giving the dirtiest, meanest, bitchiest looks ever. Like, Che is a villain in this scene. Che is just a straight-up sociopathic, self-absorbed, narcissist villain in this scene. And what's interesting is when you go and listen to the Writer's Room podcast, Michael Patrick King says, oh, this is the scene where I think people will, make Che out to be the villain. Like, Che, people will be, because one of the writers asked, like, who do you think people will side with in this scene, Miranda or Che? And then, MPK is definitely like, oh, definitely, like, people aren't going to like Che from this scene. And this other woman's like, really? Because I think it's perfectly reasonable, like it's just this one thing. They're thinking it's going to be a Rorschach test. Like half the audience is going to be on Che's side. That's how clueless these people still are about Che. Like, oh, it's totally okay to be like this angry because of a scene at work. And don't get me wrong, I would understand if you didn't know the emergency part of it, if you thought Miranda was just dummy on her phone and taking like some sort of casual call from Carrie, absolutely, be all the pissed off you want. But the moment she tells you, my son is threatening this, you got to soften up and you better be sympathetic if you're a human being at all. If you've even had a family member or anybody in your life you've ever cared about, you stop and go, oh, babe, I'm so sorry. You take care of that. You take care of that. I'll shake it off. I'm going to get back to my scene. I'm going to go make those tears for Tony Danza because that's my job. That's what they're paying me big bucks to do. And I'm a professional, damn it. That's like a normal reaction, but this is just villainous. And so all these reviews came out, and everybody's like, it's official, Che's a villain. Even like people who might be a little bit more sympathetic to these writers. But the fact that they're in the writers' room, like, really? You think people are going to be on Che's side? Why would anybody be on Che's side in this site? I mean, come on. So then we go to this pop-up jewelry, I guess jewelry sale, jewelry promotion, jewelry display. I don't know what we're calling this. I don't know what they call these things. A jewelry show. But Lizette is looking fabulous. All of her jewelry is looking great. It's a nice little tent situation. And some cater waiter starts putting all this jewelry, shoving it onto trays, putting it into his pockets. They start noticing it, and he comes up to Carrie and Seema, who's now in black, and now like the rest of this show, she's gonna be like either in black or creams, very neutral colors. But you're gonna come up to, he goes up and he starts putting everything in his pockets. He comes up to Carrie and Seema, and he tells Carrie, "Hey, give me your necklace." And they're like, "Is this happening?" And I'm like, I would be like, what do you mean, give me your necklace? I don't see, like, the guy appeared to be completely unarmed. And I'm like, we're in public, I'm here, what do you mean, give me your necklace? Like, I'm not responding to that either. So Carrie, she decides to scream at everybody that she has COVID in order to scare people and maybe get rid of this guy. He doesn't flinch from that shit. And then Seema grabs this a fake gun out of her purse, and then he runs off immediately. And she uses the gun, it's a lighter, she lights up a cigarette and starts smoking inside, but the guy's already gone off with a lot of the jewelry. It really sucked. Her very first jewelry show she worked really hard for, and now it's all gone because of this criminal, and she's, kind of yelling at the security guards for not doing anything to protect anything. I don't blame her, I'd be mad too. Then we get Miranda, she's home, and we get to see her tattoo. She got the most basic tattoo ever. She got her initials in Times New Roman font on her wrist. Now, again, compliments where it's due. That's a very sensitive place to put a tattoo. Where you have those veins there are a lot of nerves that protect you from doing damage to those veins. So wherever you have important veins or arteries, those places tend to be difficult to get tattoos. And you can see she has it right over and right next to that one really painful vein. That's for a first timer, that's actually fairly brave. But just your initials, I think she could have done a little bit better, a little bit more interesting. But if she wants to remind herself who she is, that's who she is. She's boring. She's pragmatic. She's just sort of this simple thing. Not simple, I guess, but just it's more of a down-to-earth tattoo. It's not a silly happy robot. It's a down-to-earth tattoo to remind her who she is, because she's starting to seem a little bit more like herself. And of course, Brady comes home, starts weeping in her arms, and maybe, just maybe, she's going to get back to herself, break up with Che, and give one crap about her family again. Okay. The next scene might be the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. It's so dumb. Just so stupid. Seema is walking down the street, and she sees this designer little dog, and she has to, squat all the way down and pet the thing. And then as she gets down and pets it, she notices her brightly colored Birkin bag underneath these bushes, where the guy who stole the bag apparently had no idea the value of the purse, kept the wallet, and threw the bag away. On no planet. I mean, guys, you're telling me that this brightly colored, minimum $30,000 purse, and Birkin bags aren't small either. That's a decently sized purse, brightly colored, clearly not hiding very well. You can see it from across the street. It actually kind of sticks out at you. And it's been sitting there for days while millionairesses have been walking their designer little poodles around and trying to keep their dogs from peeing in these various areas. Not a single person noticed this bag and took it for themselves. You lie, you lie. It's the laziest, lamest writing ever. Like, come on. I mean, what are we doing here? This is just dumb as hell. Oh my god, it's so stupid, guys. My mind was blown with how stupid this is, and it gave me a good chuckle with all the grieving and all the sadness about laugh out loud funny because of bad writing. I don't think that's the direction they should go, but this is where we are. And then Carrie, again, in an effort to be a good friend, a good neighbor, she lets herself out into uh, Lizette's apartment and consoles her. Carrie was talking earlier that she's not the kind of person just to lay in bed all day. And she decides she's going to lay in bed with Lizette. Lizette also worked very, very hard on those pieces just to see it all disappear. So they're all in their different levels of mourning for whatever their losses are. Lizette is in a gorgeous, gorgeous bathrobes, these robes that they have with the flowers, just like Carrie's in the Met Gala episode. Just stunning. Just again with the flowers, I'm loving it. And then we have the final scene. Seaman's still in black now, and Carrie's in more of a muted color, but I'm kind of liking Carrie's straightened hair too. I know we like the curly, Megan Fox. We love the curly, but I also like it when they stick to a nice straight like this. I think it's kind of cool. And they're at a communal table, and they're eating with a rugby team who starts flirting with them and cheersing and toasting. And just like that, Carrie gets COVID. So it sounds like Carrie, in talking to these dudes, actually contracts the coronavirus. Um, which would be kind of ironic and funny. Um, but if you are going to get COVID, it's probably best to get it from a cute rugby player. Um, I guess that's it. All right, so I guess I'm gonna try episode 4. I won't lie, guys, this is getting more and more difficult to kind of stomach and justify. It's kind of getting hard to justify to my husband why I'm like obsessed with this show, and he like watches. He's like, how? Like, how are you obsessed with this? And I think honestly, it is because if you find somebody in your life who is not really that familiar with these characters, if you were to find somebody who just like either they're new to this country or I don't know, they're a straight man or whatever the case is, and they just never watched Sex in the City, or maybe like get a younger person, somebody who never watched Sex in the City, somebody who's not emotionally invested in these characters. Somebody who were just like tell them to like watch this episode, just show them this episode for the first time. They would be like, "Why are you watching this? This is so quiet and boring and stupid. And what is all of this anyway? It's just a bunch of different scenes of people eating with each other and having weird conversations." And it's getting tougher to defend, guys. But I've come this far, so I'm sticking to it. All right. Comments below. I hope the sound was a little bit better today. Apologies if it isn't, but there is a closed captioning button. Just smash that baby if it's a problem. And thank you guys.